For 2 years, Mariam Cole brought lunch to an old man every single day. Half a sandwich, an apple, whatever coffee was left in her thermos. 12:30 p.m. without fail, at the same corner where he sat outside the luxury apartment building she cleaned. She was 29, black, working herself to exhaustion just to send money home to her mother in Atlanta. He was maybe 70, Korean, silent, wearing the same threadbare coat in winter and summer. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. 6 black SUVs rolled onto her street at dawn, engines purring like sleeping panthers. Mariam was walking to the bus stop, still in yesterday's uniform because she'd been too tired to change, when the vehicles blocked the entire road. Neighbors appeared in the windows. Mrs. Chin from 3B clutched her rosary. The bodega owner stepped back inside and locked his door. Men in suits emerged from each vehicle. Not cheap suits. The kind that cost more than Mariam made in 6 months. They moved with military precision, forming 2 lines leading from the center SUV to Mariam's apartment building entrance. The rear door of the middle vehicle opened and a man stepped out. Tall, lean, maybe mid-30s, with a face carved from ice and eyes that had seen things that would break ordinary men. He wore charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and moved like violence was a language he spoke fluently. "Mariam Cole," he said. Not a question. A statement. Mariam's heart hammered against her ribs. "Who's asking?" "My name is Min Jun. I believe you knew my father." He paused and something flickered across his face. Not quite emotional but close. "You called him Old Man Han." The world tilted. Mariam's knees went weak. "Han? Where is he? Is he okay?" Before we dive deeper into this story, click the subscribe button and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. If this story moves you, share it with someone who loves a good tale. Do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Min Jun's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped. "My father passed away 3 weeks ago. Peacefully. In his sleep. In a bed he hadn't used in 2 years because he chose the streets instead." He took a step closer. "You were the only person in this entire city who treated him like he was human. You fed the king, Miss Cole. And now the debt must be paid." Here is a paraphrased version of the story, condensed to approximately 2,000 words while maintaining the emotional depth and structure of the original chapters. The connection began on a morning so cold the air felt like glass. Mariam Cole, a 22-year-old maid for Prestige Property Management, hurried toward her bus stop, her breath hitching in the January wind. Her life was a grueling cycle of scrubbing floors and luxury high-rises from 6 a.m. until long after dark. The pay was a pittance, barely enough to cover her rent and the tuition she sent home for her younger sister's education at Spelman College. Mariam was a woman who lived on the margins, invisible to the wealthy residents whose trash she emptied and whose marble she polished. That was the day she saw him, an elderly Korean man sitting on a flattened piece of cardboard outside Grandview Towers. He wore a threadbare green coat and sat with a stillness that was jarring amidst the frantic energy of the city. He didn't beg. He didn't hold a sign. He simply existed, a stationary stone in a river of rushing people. For 2 days, Mariam walked past, her own hunger a gnawing reminder of her poverty. But on the 3rd day, the sight of his hunched shoulders broke something inside her. She approached him tentatively, holding out a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a napkin. "I made extra," she lied, her voice trembling. "Would you like it?" The man opened his eyes. They were not the hazy eyes of the broken, but sharp and piercingly clear. He studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for an ulterior motive, before finally accepting the offering. He didn't speak. He simply took a deliberate bite, his gaze never leaving her. As she turned to leave, she heard a soft hum, a sound of quiet approval that stayed with her all day. Within a week it became a ritual. Every day at 12:30 p.m., during her meager lunch break, Mariam would leave the luxury building she was cleaning to sit on the cold pavement beside the man she came to know as Old Man Han. In her stained maid's uniform, she sat in front of expensive storefronts, sharing her sandwiches and her soul. Han remained a silent statue, but Mariam found herself confessing her life to him. She told him about her dream of nursing school, a dream that cost $12,000 she didn't have. She told him about her sister who was going to be somebody, unlike herself. "I'm just the one who cleans up after important people," she whispered one afternoon. Han didn't respond with words, but his presence felt like an anchor. He was a confessional for her secrets and a witness to her existence in a city that wanted her to be invisible. The seasons bled into one another. Mariam brought hot soup in thermoses during the winter and hand warmers from the dollar store. Her supervisor, Mrs. Vanderberg, noticed the charity and was quick to offer her venom. "You're wasting food on that bum," Vanderberg sneered. "He's probably got more money than you. Professional beggars always do." "He isn't begging," Mariam replied, her voice small but firm. That afternoon she sat with Han and confessed the cruelty of her boss. "People think I'm stupid for feeding you," she said. "Maybe they're right." Han looked at her then, a deep, soul-piercing look that felt like recognition. For a fleeting second, Mariam saw past the threadbare coat. She saw a man of immense gravity. Then the moment vanished and he returned to his meal. The second year was a test of endurance. A brutal summer heat wave turned the city into an oven, yet Mariam never missed a day. In July she arrived at the corner with tears streaming down her face. "I got accepted," she sobbed. "The nursing program. But I'm short $4,000 for the tuition. I'm working 70 hours a week and I'm so tired, Mr. Han. I don't know if I can do it." She fell apart there on the sidewalk while businessmen stepped over her legs. Han didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, he reached into his bag and pressed a clean napkin into her hand. It was a simple, profound gesture of comfort. As the months passed, Mariam began to share her impossible dreams. She spoke of opening a clinic in poor neighborhoods where people like her, maids, janitors, and delivery drivers, could be treated with dignity. "My mama says I dream too big," Mariam admitted. "But why not me? Why not you?" She spoke of Mrs. Vanderberg's constant reminders that Mariam should be grateful for her lowly position. For the first time Han made a vocal sound, a low grunt of clear disapproval. "You don't like her either, huh?" Mariam smiled sadly. "She thinks some people are worth more than others. I used to think rich people were better too. But they're just lucky. Or meaner. Or both." Mariam had no way of knowing that Han was not a victim of circumstance, but a man of legendary power. Born into the underworld, he was a former mafia boss who had built an empire on blood and loyalty. As he aged, he became disillusioned with the greed of his successors. He had chosen the streets as a self-imposed exile, a trial of the streets, to see if a single spark of genuine humanity remained in the world. He had sat on that corner for 2 years as a king in disguise. Thousands of people had passed him by. Some had spat at him. Most had ignored him. Only one had stopped. Only one had shared her last bit of bread without asking for a name or a favor. Every word Mariam spoke was being catalogued. Every kindness was a deposit into a debt that could never be fully repaid with money alone. He was measuring the weight of her soul, and Mariam was proving to be pure gold. The end came without warning. On a Tuesday in late autumn, Mariam arrived at the corner at 12:30 p.m., her lunch bag in hand. But the pavement was bare. No cardboard, no green coat, no old man Han. She stood paralyzed as the crowd surged around her. The doorman of Grandview Towers, Marcus, eventually took pity on her. "The old guy? Some people picked him up last week," Marcus said with a shrug. "Nice cars. Black SUVs. I figured his family finally came for him." "Last week?" Mariam's heart sank. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Didn't think it mattered," Marcus replied. Mariam knelt on the sidewalk, touching the concrete where Han had sat for 2 years. It felt inexplicably clean, as if the space had been sanctified. She felt a profound sense of grief. She realized then that she didn't even know his last name. She had respected his silence, but now she feared she had simply been too timid to save him. The following days were a haze of sorrow. She continued to go to the corner out of habit, sitting alone and eating her sandwich while people whispered that she was the new crazy one on the block. Mrs. Vanderberg found her weeping in a supply closet and took the opportunity to twist the knife. "Still moping?" the supervisor laughed. "He used you for free meals and vanished the second he got a better offer. Wake up, Mariam. Nobody cares about the help. You weren't special to him, you were just a vending machine." Mariam tried to ignore the words, but they took root. She began to wonder if her mother was right, that she was a fool for dreaming of a world where people looked out for one another. She stopped bringing the extra sandwich. She stopped looking at the corner. The light in her eyes began to dim as she resigned herself to the gray, hopeless reality of her life. She went home to her cramped apartment, counting her pennies and realizing she would have to decline the nursing school offer. The $4,000 might as well have been $4 million. She felt defeated, invisible, and utterly alone. However, across the city, in a fortress of glass and steel, Han was no longer the man in the green coat. He was sitting at the head of a mahogany table, dressed in a suit that cost more than Mariam would earn in a decade. His son, Min Jun, the current head of the syndicate, stood at his side. "She is the one?" Min Jun asked, looking at a surveillance photo of Mariam sitting on the sidewalk. She is the only one, Han replied, his voice raspy from years of silence but carrying the weight of a mountain. She gave me bread when I was a beggar. Now we shall give her the world. Mariam stood on her narrow street, the salt of her own sweat stinging her eyes. She stared at the man who had emerged from the lead SUV, a figure of sharp angles and expensive wool. He stood amidst a sea of black vehicles that had effectively erased her neighborhood's existence, turning a bustling Queens block into a private fortress. I don't understand, Mariam said, her voice a thin thread against the idling engines. Han is dead? And you're his son? Min Jun's expression was a mask of neutral stone. My father's name was Han Jae-sung. To the world he was a ghost or a king. To you he was the man on the corner. He gestured toward the nearest vehicle. Get in. This isn't the place for this conversation. I'm not getting in a car with a stranger, Mariam snapped, her terror finally sparking into defiance. You knew my father for 2 years. Min Jun's voice dropped, vibrating with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Every day at 12:30, you brought him the half of your lunch you couldn't afford to give away. You sat with him when your feet were throbbing from 12-hour shifts. You told him about your sister's tuition and your dreams of owning a small bakery. You treated him with dignity when the rest of the world treated him like urban blight. So no, you don't know me. But I know everything about you, Mariam Cole. Mariam looked up. Neighbors were peering through cracked blinds. Mrs. Chin was recording from her fire escape. By sundown, Mariam would be the neighborhood's biggest mystery or its greatest villain. 5 minutes, Mariam whispered. In my apartment. Min Jun followed her up 3 flights of creaking stairs. Inside her studio the contrast was jarring. His shoes, which likely cost more than her annual rent, remained silent on her worn linoleum. He didn't look around with pity, he looked with a clinical, terrifying focus. Sit, Mariam commanded, her own legs trembling. Min Jun sat in her only folding chair. 30 years ago my father built an empire on fear and blood. He was the most powerful man in this city's underworld. But 10 years ago when my mother died, the ice in him began to crack. He started wondering if anyone cared for the man or just the crown. Mariam listened, trying to map this ruthless king onto the silent old man who had accepted her sandwiches with a slight, shaking bow. 2 years ago he walked away, Min Jun continued. He called it the trial of the streets. He wanted to see if genuine honor still existed in a city he helped corrupt. He wanted to see if anyone would show kindness to a man with nothing to offer in return. 97,000 people walked past his cardboard box. Only one person stopped. Every single day. I just fed him, Mariam choked out. He looked hungry. To you it was a sandwich. To him, it was a reason not to let the city burn. Min Jun set a leather folder on her table. My father died 3 weeks ago. He left a life debt. Everything he owned outside of the criminal organization, his legitimate real estate empire, is now yours. Mariam stared at the folder. I don't want it. 27 buildings. 4 properties in Jersey City. The Grandview Towers where you currently scrub floors. Min Jun leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. The portfolio is valued at $42 million. You are now the landlord of the people who used to look past you. The room spun. Mariam gripped the edge of her sink. This is insane. I'm a maid. That's why he chose you. Because you did the right thing when you thought no one was watching. Min Jun stood, his silhouette blocking the light from her single window. But understand this, my father had enemies. Rivals who see this inheritance as a weakness to be exploited. By naming you he didn't just give you a gift. He gave you a target. So it's a death sentence, Mariam whispered. It's an opportunity, Min Jun corrected. If you refuse, the properties go to vultures who will evict every family in your neighborhood to build luxury condos. My father gave you the shield to protect these people. Whether you're strong enough to hold it is the final trial. He moved to the door. My father's last words were, I finally found someone who makes the world less cold. He died happy because of you. My men are outside. You have until dawn to decide if you're a maid or a queen. Mariam spent the night in a chair, watching the red and blue glow of the city leak through her curtains. At 6 a.m. a sharp knock startled her. She opened the door to a woman in a razor-sharp suit and a stylist carrying 3 garment bags. Miss Cole? Jennifer Park, chief counsel for the Han estate. We have a board meeting at 9. We're late. The next 3 hours were a blur of high-end transformation. Mariam was scrubbed, buffed, and poured into a navy silk suit that felt like armor. As the stylist worked on her hair, Jennifer briefed her on the portfolio. The directors of Han Property Holdings are old-world men, Jennifer warned. They see a black woman from Queens and they think liability. They don't know that you've survived more in a week than they have in a lifetime. Don't let them see you blink. Mariam stared at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked lethal. Gone was the exhausted maid with the slumped shoulders. In her place stood a woman who looked like she owned the skyline. They arrived at the Midtown headquarters in a motorcade. Min Jun sat in the SUV with her, a silent shadow. When they reached the executive floor, the air was thick with mahogany and hostility. 12 board members sat around a glass table, their faces twisted in various stages of disbelief. This is a joke, a man named Wilkins spat the moment Mariam sat down. Han was senile. We aren't turning over a multi-million-dollar corporation to a woman who cleans toilets for a living. The room went cold. Min Jun didn't move, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's will is ironclad, he said softly. You can work for Ms. Cole, or you can find out how my side of the business handles insubordination. The threat worked. Wilkins turned pale and looked at his lap. Jennifer began the presentation, but Mariam tuned out the jargon. She looked at the list of properties. Most were in immigrant neighborhoods, the low-yield areas the rest of the city ignored. What's the plan for the Grandview Towers? Mariam asked, her voice surprisingly steady. We're subcontracting a new cleaning firm to cut costs by 20%, one woman replied. It will increase the quarterly dividend. No, Mariam said. The board went silent. We aren't subcontracting, Mariam continued, leaning forward. We are hiring the cleaning and maintenance staff directly. We're providing full health benefits and a starting wage of $20 an hour. And we're doing it for every building in the portfolio. That will destroy our margins. Wilkins yelped. Then take it out of the executive bonus pool, Mariam countered. I've worked for the firms you hire. I know the cost-cutting means the staff can't afford medicine. Mr. Han didn't give me this company to make you richer. He gave it to me to make the tenants' lives better. If you can't make that sustainable, I'll find people who can. She stood up, her new heels clicking with the authority of a gavel. She walked to the window looking down at the street. She saw a maid in a beige uniform walking toward the subway. She saw herself. This company is now about dignity, she told the silent room. Dismissed. She walked out before they could recover. In the hallway, she ducked into a restroom, gripped the marble vanity and gasped for air. The adrenaline was afire in her veins, but the terror was right behind it. Min Jun was leaning against the wall when she emerged. You have a talent for making enemies, he said. There was a glimmer in his eyes that almost looked like respect. I'm just doing what's right, she said, wiping her palms on her skirt. Doing what's right is the most dangerous thing you can do in this city, Min Jun replied. My father's rivals, men like Dmitry Volkov, won't care about your fair wages. They only see a new player on the board. We're moving you to a secure location tonight. Your life as Mariam the maid is officially over. The transition to her new life was not a slow fade, it was a violent snap. 3 days later, Mariam was in the back of an armored SUV, traveling toward a community center she planned to fund. She was looking at a spreadsheet on a tablet trying to understand property taxes, when the world turned upside down. A thunderous boom shattered the afternoon. The lead vehicle in their convoy vanished in a plume of orange fire and black smoke. Get down, her bodyguard, a man named Elias, screamed. He shoved her onto the floorboard just as a hail of gunfire raked the side of the car. The sound was like giant hail hitting a tin roof, ting ting ting, the armored glass spider webbing but holding. Mariam pressed her face into the carpet, the scent of expensive leather and gunpowder filling her lungs. Is it Min Jun? She cried out. No, it's a hit. Elias roared, pulling a submachine gun from beneath his seat and returning fire through the gun ports. Outside the street was a war zone. Bystanders scrambled for cover as masked gunmen advanced. Through the gap in the front seats, Mariam saw the flaming wreckage of the first car. 2 men she had shared coffee with that morning were there. The driver slammed the SUV into reverse, tires screaming as he smashed through a parked car to create an escape route. After a frantic 3-minute chase through the narrow alleys of Queens, the gunfire faded. They pulled into a nondescript warehouse 10 miles away. Min Jun was already there, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying rage. He wrenched the door open and pulled Mariam out. He checked her for injuries with hands that were surprisingly steady, though his eyes were burning. Dmitry Volkov, Min Jun spat the name like a curse. He's testing the perimeter. He thinks because you're a civilian, I'll fold to protect you. 2 people died today, Mariam said, her voice shaking with a cold, hard anger. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating. Because of a real estate portfolio? Because of power, Min Jun corrected. Dimitri wants the Jersey City docks. My father held them through the property company. If he kills you, the properties go into probate and he moves in. To him, you are just a bureaucratic obstacle. I'm a person, she shouted. To the people in this room, yes. To the monsters outside? No. Min Jun stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You have 2 choices now, Mariam. You can hide in a basement for the rest of your life while I fight your battles, or you can show them that Han didn't pick a victim. He picked a partner. What does that mean? It means we don't hide. We negotiate from a position of strength. Min Jun's jaw tightened. Dimitri has called for a sit-down. He wants to see the Maid Queen for himself. He expects you to be trembling. He expects you to offer him the docks just to make the nightmare stop. Mariam looked at her hands. They were stained with the soot of the explosion. She thought about old man Han sitting on his cardboard box, watching the world with those ancient, tired eyes. He hadn't been hiding. He had been judging. When is the meeting? She asked. Min Jun paused, searching her face. Tonight. Midnight. Neutral ground. Then get me a different suit, Mariam said, her voice turning as cold as the linoleum in her old apartment. One that doesn't have the smell of smoke on it. If he wants to see who I am, I'm going to show him exactly what a woman from Queens looks like when you try to take what's hers. Min Jun nodded slowly. Elias, get the cleaners. We have a meeting to prepare for. As Mariam walked toward the dressing room, she realized she wasn't just paying a debt anymore. She was at war. And for the first time in 9 years, the frozen parts of the world, the invisible parts, were starting to fight back. Mariam Cole arrived at Grandview Towers at 6 a.m., but she didn't head for the service entrance. Dressed in a sharp charcoal suit and flanked by 2 stoic bodyguards, she walked through the main lobby. The doorman, who had ignored her for 2 years, nearly dropped his clipboard. She took the elevator to the 3rd-floor management office. Mrs. Vanderberg, the supervisor who had spent 15 years treating Mariam like a ghost, didn't even look up. Can I help you? She asked with her usual dismissive bite. Yes, you can, Mariam said. You can clean out your desk. Mrs. Vanderberg's head snapped up. Contempt flickered in her eyes until she saw the suit and the security. Mariam? What is this? I am the new owner of this building, Mariam replied, setting a folder on the desk. As of last week, I own Han Property Holdings. Your contract is terminated. You're fired. The supervisor's face paled. You can't do this. You're just some maid who got lucky. I'm the woman who heard every insult you threw at people who were beneath you, Mariam said, her voice steady but lethal. You spent 15 years crushing spirits. You have 1 hour to vacate. You think a suit makes you better than me? Mrs. Vanderberg spat. You're still just a maid playing dress-up. Mariam paused. She thought of old man Han's quiet dignity on his cardboard box. You're right. I am a maid. I've scrubbed floors and known what it feels like to be invisible. That's exactly why I'm qualified to run this empire, because I will make sure no one who works for me ever feels that way again. As security escorted the woman out, Mariam looked out the window at Han's empty corner. Jennifer Park, her new advisor, stepped up beside her. Strategic? No. Necessary? Absolutely. But the Russians are waiting, Mariam. Are you ready for Dimitri? Mariam took a breath. Han hadn't chosen her because she was safe. He chose her because she was brave enough to see a king in a beggar. Let's go. The meeting was held at an upscale restaurant where violence was bad for business but always on the menu. Dmitry Volkov, the young, cold-eyed Russian rival, assessed Mariam like a commodity. Min Jun sat beside her, his presence a silent threat. So this is the famous Mariam Cole, Dmitry mocked. The maid who inherited a kingdom. Han had a sense of humor. My father had honor, Min Jun countered. Something you lack. Dmitry shrugged. Business is business. I want those 3 buildings in Brooklyn. They sit on land I'm developing. Sign them over and the accidents at your properties will stop. Your tenants will be safe. Mariam knew those buildings. They were low-income housing for immigrant families. If she signed, those families would be on the street within a month. No, Mariam said. Dmitry's smile vanished. You're choosing war for a few slums? I'm choosing to honor the man who gave me this responsibility, Mariam replied. He left these properties to someone who would protect people, not profit from their displacement. You can threaten me, but I won't destroy their homes to save myself. You're very brave for someone I almost killed yesterday, Dimitri hissed. Min Jun reached for his jacket, but Mariam stopped him. I'm not brave, she told Dimitri. I'm terrified. But my mother cleaned houses for 30 years to give us a future. She never compromised her values for convenience, and neither will I. Outside, safely in the armored SUV, Min Jun handed Mariam a compact gun. Dimitri won't stop. You need to carry this. Mariam stared at the cold steel. No. If I start ruling through fear, I become the people I'm fighting. Han didn't leave this to a tyrant. He left it to a healer. Min Jun studied her for a long moment before putting the weapon away. My father chose well, he whispered. By the way, your sister just got a full scholarship to law school. Anonymous donor. Tears pricked Mariam's eyes. Min Jun looked away. Consider it part of the debt. The hard part is just beginning. 1 year later, Mariam stood at the entrance of Han Memorial Park. It was a vibrant green space in the heart of the city, built on the block she had reclaimed. The corner where Han used to sleep was now marked by a bronze plaque. In this place, a king found proof that kindness still exists. Min Jun approached, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. Over the years, their wary alliance had become a true partnership. He handled the shadows, she brought the light. The board still thinks you're crazy for turning prime real estate into a park, Min Jun said with a rare smile. And what did you tell them? I told them anyone with a problem could discuss it with me personally. They suddenly found the park very charming. Mariam laughed. She had transformed the portfolio. Rents were tied to income. The cleaning staff were now managers. The invisible people of the city finally had a champion. Even her mother was involved, running a community kitchen with Han's widow. Do you regret it? Min Jun asked. The danger? The weight of it. Mariam looked at the children playing where a homeless man once suffered. Not for a second. Min Jun handed her an envelope. My father asked me to give you this on the anniversary. Mariam opened the shaky handwriting of a man who had been a king for 60 years and a beggar for 2. Dear Mariam, the letter read. If you're reading this, you survived the first year. For 2 years, you gave me something more valuable than food. Every sandwich was an act of rebellion against the cynicism I'd built my empire on. Every conversation proved that honor wasn't dead. The world will call you naive. They will tell you to extract more and care less. Don't listen. The world has enough landlords, it needs more healers. Build something that makes invisible people visible. Build something that proves kindness isn't weakness. Build something that makes the world less cold. Mariam wiped a tear away. The last words of a man who had tested a whole city and found her worthy. He was right about you, Min Jun said softly. Everything he hoped you'd be, you are. I'm just doing what feels right, she replied. As the sun set, Mariam looked at the plaque. She had been a maid who shared her lunch. Now she was the guardian of a legacy. She had learned that the greatest power wasn't control, it was the courage to care. Thank you, she whispered to the memory of the old man. Thank you for seeing me. The debt was paid, but the beautiful, difficult work of making the world less cold was only just beginning. Mariam Cole was ready.